So let's begin. Let's just head off to the first slide here, which is really just a quick summary of this release. Released a matter of what, nearly 2 weeks ago now. So it's been in the public domain for quite a while. The primary sort of goal or release goal was to make sure that we had a BricsCAD V25 compatible version of Civil Site Design, because BricsCAD V25 was released in, I think, late October. But alongside that, we're able to develop and implement enhanced or new functions and features and tools, which you're going to be seeing today. And if you are interested, you can obviously see the platform versions that correlate to this version of Civil Site Design. The key thing is that if you want more information specifically around the release, I know at least one person in the audience reads these release notes, because there was once, many, many years ago, a colleague put a little note in the release notes to say, does anybody read these? And that person, who's probably sitting in the audience right now, is chuckling to themselves, because yes, that person emailed and says, I read them. But if you do want more information, it's something we don't broadcast that often, but we do have on the civilsitedesign.com.au website release notes section, where you can go and do a bit more of a deep dive on what's gone in. Otherwise, you can join us on this webinar. So I'll be presenting on the first two items that you can see in here, and Todd will be just about to take over. You'll be discussing these last three. But the idea is that we're really just giving you a bit of a highlights tour. So the first thing I'm going to be talking about and showing you is something called Project Storage, which is was released and replaced Pack Mode. Which for those of you that have maybe used Civil Site Design in the past, you may have used Pack Mode. Intersection Manager has also been introduced, and that is a huge piece of kit in respect of managing all your intersections and your curb returns all in one single centralized location, making it much, much easier to identify your intersections, how they're being structured in respect of T, crossing, etc. And there's lots of extra little bells and whistles that we have added to make your life a lot easier when it comes to intersection creation and management. Todd, I'll just hand over to you for sectional volumes.
Thank you, Jonathan. Yes, so sectional volumes is a new bit of kit that we added to the software in the last release. It is an additional volume computational engine, so it kind of has a similar look and feel to our previous volume computations, but is a whole new engine, and it is polygon based. So it'll actually show you the areas of cut and fill. It'll give you much more information about what you're actually trying to calculate in terms of your string calculations for your model. For your volume computations. It was actually primarily driven by our European user base. They in particular use the new extension and resolve functionality, so we will touch on that, but it is certainly beneficial to the entire user base across all regions of the world. The next one is the reference profiles. So this is a new set of tools to manage the edges of your roads. So it's an additional set of functions that will kind of tie together a few steps that you would normally do manually. So you normally would generate some sort of string control and then do some sort of variation to adopt that string to manipulate the edges of your road if you needed to grade out low points or something like that on the approach of an intersection. This set of tools actually combines that whole lot together. So it uses a profile that is based off the road centerline geometry information. So everything's projected from there and allows you to set up relationships to the reference that you're trying to manipulate, which might be the edge of bitumen, could be something else, might be back a curb, inverted curb. And then you use a scriptx control to actually apply that as a variation to your model. So it manages that whole lot for you. So we'll jump into it, show you how it all works. This one was actually driven a lot by our US customers. This is a very common design approach in the US. And then the other sort of part that goes with that is the projected profile. So this is something that only works on the Civil 3D version of Civil Site Design. And in the US in particular, it is very common practice to actually project your adjacent profiles onto your primary strings profiles. So your road centerline would be your main reference, but then you might project on these reference profiles. You might even also project on your curb return information and display it on the same profile view. Now, this is actually a little bit different than the superimposed profile that lives in Civil 3D, because that's actually a tessellated element that's a true projection. This is actually showing you the proper vertical curve information projected across to the profile view. So yeah, so we'll have a jump into that at the end once we've made a few reference profiles. All right,
Thanks,
back over
Todd.
to you, Jonathan.
Thank you very much. Seamless segue. You should see how we do the screen sharing in a bit, but yeah, seamless. Lovely. Well, look, we are going to just have a quick look at project storage. So for those of you that have used pack mode, this is kind of this is a replacement to pack mode. And for those of you that haven't adopted pack mode, then don't worry about it, because essentially you're not going to adopt it. You'd be looking to adopt project storage with V25.1. And V25.1, we actually turn project storage on by default. So when you start a new project, as you're going to be seeing, essentially what's going to be happening is this. Now, I put a little animation together. And the reason why is because there's only so much moving my mouse around and highlighting folders and bits and pieces I can show you. So I've got a little animation. So for those of you that don't know what pack mode is, essentially your data folder gets compressed and put inside your DWG file. The benefit of this means that you can save your file, save as your file, copy, rename, and move your DWG file around, making it, as I've put at the top there, entirely portable. But it also means, because the data folder, which is being operated, still used, is not residing next to your drawing with project storage. It means that that particular drawing can be stored on cloud storage, and your data folder is being put into an alternative location locally on your computer. I spoke to somebody literally a couple of weeks ago who they are running their drawing and data folders all from OneDrive. So you imagine the pain and the process of trying to read the data folder whilst you're working in the DWG file. The original point of pack mode was to kind of alleviate that. Project storage is the next step forward. Okay, so if we skip forward to the next slide, it's really just, how does this work? Okay, and I've done a little video animation to help you visualize what exactly is happening with project storage. I'm not going to undertake, obviously, this process because of time, but I will show you, obviously, showing you how it works. But essentially what's happening is this. We start a new civil site design project. Normally what would happen is this would happen. Okay, we get a new data folder with the name of our drawing put next to the drawing. Okay, however, with project storage, this is all happening now for you on your behalf, and the location of the data folder is not next to the drawing. And there's good reason for this. And what we're trying to kind of emphasize with a lot of this is cloud storage. You know, I use Google Drive, for example. If I have the data folder next to the drawing, that's all being synced up. There's potential cause for corruption because, you know, Google might not sync, or I might have syncing turned off, for example, which I have done. So what we're doing is putting your data folder in an alternative location. Okay, that's all we're doing on the initial pass. What's then happening is when you close your drawing, as I failed to pause there and actually reset, when you close your drawing, what we're then doing is zipping your data folder up and putting it inside your drawing. Meaning you can take your drawing wherever you want, and whenever you open the drawing up, a new data folder is created. Show you that in action. Watch what happens now every time I open a project. So when I open this project up again, I get a brand new copy of a data folder. The original, still there. Open it up again, get a brand new copy of a data folder. The benefit with project storage is that we're uniquely naming every single data folder and linking it with a unique, what we call GUID, excuse me, bashing the mic, back to the drawing file. Okay, so they're completely linked. The benefit with this is that with V1 here, for example, if I click play, I'm able to actually restore that particular data folder and start, and you're going to see me do that today. I can actually go and grab a previous data folder and restore it, and then press move slide rather than play. I knew this was going to happen. And then what will end up happening is that particular data folder, if I press play, that particular data folder will then be compressed and then put back into the DWG file. Okay, so
hey, Jonathan. Sorry, there's a question come in, and this is a good point to put it in, so I'm sorry to interrupt. But
please,
if for heaven forbid they had a crash, the same process could be applied in that when you open the project up again, it would re-extract the data as it was at the time when the file was last saved, which might be old, but you can go into the data history and actually pick the active file you want to use. So you can actually restore back versions. So the restore is not just all about this, it's actually good for a recovery if you needed to.
Yeah, absolutely. Now we'll have a quick look and show you. No, good question. Thank you. We'll have a quick look at how this works in operation. At this point, I will kill my camera, folks, just so you don't have to get distracted by me. And I believe Todd may well do the same. We may pop them back on towards the end. So project storage. Let's have a quick look at where it is, first of all, in your tool space, which I'm hoping many of you have begun to adopt. Right-clicking on the drawing name, it happens to be called project storage. We've got project storage. And if you head to the ribbon tabs, you've got data manage and pack settings, or pack data settings now being replaced with project storage. I'm going to use tool space here because it's my favorite place to go now to open things, and we'll fire it up. Now, just before I do this, actually, what I might do is I'll just click on cancel here. I'm just going to just go and create a brand new drawing and then save the drawing. Just to show you what happens when you start off, I'm just going to just save this to desktop. We'll call it drawing 1. Launch Civil Site Design. Watch what happens. So if you start a brand new project, you haven't set up project storage or we've labeled it there, pack mode, into the DWT file, this is what you get prompted with. So project storage is turned on by default, meaning your data folder is going to reside in a different spot. All optional. If you don't want to use project storage on a brand new project, you uncheck this box. We are encouraging users and the general user base to begin to adopt this. Okay, so that's why it's turned on by default now, rather than being entirely optional. So you can put a project name in, a description, which is editable, but essentially this is what will pop up when you start a brand new project. So if you do adopt it, as I've done here, we'll head back to the drawing that I'll just wait for this to initialize. I'll head back to the drawing that was in previously, which is this one here. And then again, tool space is a good indicator that things have initialized, because that launch CSD icon disappears and all my content appears in the display here. So if you do want to turn it on, and by the way, I've got to mention this, if you've already adopted pack mode, you're thinking, well, how is this going to impact me? All you need to do is open up project storage and click OK. And what's going to happen is it is going to essentially zip your data folder for you, put it inside the DWG, and then unzip it in this location here. Now, I'll talk about that location in a minute, but let's just discuss what's going on at the top here. All of this information you're seeing on screen is entirely optional. You are not required to put a project name, description, and session notes, but it can be of benefit. Every time you open your project, a copy is taken of your previous project name, description, and session notes and appended into these cells. So if you close your project down 15 times and reopen it 15 times, you'll see the same description and session notes. But you can go and append information to this. If I go webinar version, when I now shut this version down, I'll actually get that little tooltip down here with my session notes telling me, oh, this is the webinar version of this particular project, but it's all optional. Now, every time I close my project and reopen, I'm going to get a brand new data folder being created for me with all my project information in this location here. You can see here, I have a data folder in that location, but it's got a unique name. Every single data folder that is created as part of opening this project up with project storage will get uniquely named with this GUID. So there's no potential for any kind of cross-pollination of alignment naming, anything like that, because this is a completely unique project every time that I open it up. If you do want to change the location, notice how it is different, for those of you that have used pack mode, to the location we defaulted to with the original pack mode. Please, 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 even if you are using pack mode now and you don't intend to necessarily upgrade to V25.1, please change your location to something along these lines, because we understand that there are certain Windows functions and other applications which will actively strip the original pack mode location of content, thus removing data folders that you may have residing there, which is why we have a new location to safeguard your data folders. In respect of just simple day-to-day, okay, when you are operating with pack mode, sorry, I've got to stop calling it pack mode. When you are operating with project storage, there will be a tendency where you'll probably want to do a save as. Okay, now if you do run a save as, you will need to immediately, after you have done that, run reset project ID, GUID. Otherwise, what's going to happen is that saved version will still be connected to all of these data folders through here. Okay, so what you want to do is basically give yourself a clean break and reset once you've done that save as, run reset GUID. Another example for those of you that were using pack mode and having it set up in your template is to clear the project GUID, as in remove it entirely. Okay, meaning that when you start a new project, you're able to go in and actually get clean, brand new data folders, start generating from that DWT file. Now, in regards to these two options at the top, clean project storage folder is actually going to wipe any folders located in this location. All right, because as you can see, just from the course of the past few days, this list of data folders is growing exponentially. Now, I can choose to right click on one of those and delete. Okay, and that will delete it from Windows Explorer. Obviously, this is more of an holistic version, which will remove any data folders from any project that have been unpacked. Bear in mind that if you're using project storage, your data folder will be inside your DWG file. So there's not going to be any corruption for existing projects. But that will remove everything in there. You can also choose to just go to Windows Explorer and trim out the ones you don't want as well if you wish. Let's have a look at the restoration of a previous version. What I want to make clear is that we are not appending data folder content from one project to another. We are completely reusing a completely different data folder. Let's just use this area, as I knew I was going to have to pan. If I click OK, I'm just going to have to come back to project storage because I'm going to pan to an area where you can at least clearly see what's going on. If I go back to project storage. So I've basically had this project open for a few days and just been tinkering with it, closing down, opening it, making changes, changing the session notes, just working on it. Obviously not to maybe the same extent you guys would, but trying to generate a number of versions. So let's just go back to one that was yesterday afternoon and click Restore Version. Now, if I highlight there, I can see that I applied some new variations to Eyelet Street and a few other bits and pieces. Now, if you want to restore this, what's going to happen is that if you check this box here, a zip file of your current data folder will preserve what you've got there right now. However, because I've opened this project up and not done anything on it within the past 10 minutes and reopened it again, that's a snapshot of my project, literally half an hour, 40 minutes ago. So I'm pretty happy. I can go and grab that one if I want to in a minute. So I'm going to click yes. And what we will see, sorry, is even the grading string coming back in here. There are going to be questions raised about, well, what happens if alignments aren't there? I have tested this and we've tested it whereby alignments that were created in this version or were not created in that version are fully respected. If this row 3, you've deleted that alignment and you go and restore that data set from yesterday where row 3 did exist, we simply just don't draw the string. Okay, a lot of work has been done by the development team to clear up all the messaging so that if the string doesn't exist, we don't keep barking at you saying, where's the alignment, where's the alignment, where's the alignment? We'll actually just leave it until you actually go ahead and create it. Then the string will be recreated, including things like curve returns as well. But you can see that we haven't appended this drainage and that grading string to the data folder. We have completely replaced the data folder that was being used originally with this one dated yesterday afternoon. So we'll just head back, project storage, and then we'll just head on to the intersection manager just to sort of show you how we can get it. So there's my 1220 version. There's the version I just restored a minute ago. Going to click restore version, say yes. Click OK. Then I should really just wait for this a second rather than forcibly clicking OK here, because it's obviously now doing a complete switch in respect to which data folder it's now being told to use. Now I'm now getting that information being removed from the screen. So even the grading string, as I was initially going to say there, that uses a polyline. Okay, that polyline doesn't exist. So we go ahead and we rebuild that polyline for you for that grading string. So a lot of work has gone into making sure that you get a huge amount of data integrity checking and whatnot to make sure that you get everything transferred over between those data folders. That's all I've got time for on project storage. Todd, is there any other questions on project storage before I move on to the intersection manager?
There were a few questions, and I might answer a couple of them, or sorry, pose a couple of them in the session just because probably pertinent for everybody to know. There was a question about whether it was faster than running with the data folder, and the response is depending on where the drawing lives. If it's on the local hard drive, then it probably makes no difference. But it is certainly more advantageous in terms of rename and version control. But if you're running on some sort of network or cloud service, then it is most certainly faster to use project storage because the data folder is essentially local to the computer, and it's only the drawing that actually gets stored up in the cloud or the network location. So the slowdown in terms of network traffic is only at the point of save.
Yeah,
The other questions is about what happens when you crash, which we talked about before, but the software offers you options about restore. Another question was about whether or not someone opens the drawing up in just plain AutoCAD without Civil Site Design installed. The zip file that gets bound inside the drawing doesn't get touched. So as long as they don't
nothing
break something
happens to
that
it.
Civil Site
No,
Design requires, it shouldn't be a problem.
no.
I think that were the main things that were probably pertinent to let everybody know about.
Yeah, it's only Civil Site Design which gets access to that data folder inside your
Yeah.
DWG. There's no other piece of
Um,
software that will.
One thing it probably does do, but I don't think it's a big thing. Actually, I'm just thinking was that if you do put the the project storage, so I'm as guilty as you, Jonathan, with the pack mode
You
name.
are
Um, it does make your drawing file slightly bigger because obviously it's the data is being bound inside,
correct.
but it's not, I think, anything unmanageable. The other thing, maybe just to make note of, because this is something that I tended to do when I used this software when I was in the other side of the fence. Um, I tended to XREF quite a few things into my drawing. If you actually are exporting data to the data folder, like,
Yes, this
maybe
is a good
plot to
point.
file type stuff,
Yep.
then you probably should be best practice to move it out of the data folder because when you reference it back in, two things are going to happen. And Jonathan, you've got it up on the screen now, which is perfect. Because there are unique locations for the data folder every time you open, it would actually be looking at an older version of the XREF location. And two,
Mm.
you kind of chicken and the egg territory. If you've got an XREF bound inside a data folder that's inside a DWG, the XREF tries to access the XREF location before the data folder gets extracted and can get a bit messy. So my recommendation is to, if you've got plot to file type stuff, externalize it to a file that is not part of the data structure of Civil Site
Yeah.
Design.
I think we generally encourage it anyway. I think going forward, I think for many users, we would try and discourage storing things inside the data folder. Just generally anyway, I think as a matter of course. Would you agree with that, Todd?
Yeah. Yep. There was another question just come up, which is actually a good one, which was if someone else opens up the drawing if say it's stored on a cloud or a network location, and they open it up on their machine, will they see the full history? And the answer is no. The history will only be shown to what's available to the computer at the time. So the history that Jonathan's showing you on the screen is on Jonathan's computer. If he'd sent me the drawing file, I'd be able to open it, but I'd only see the latest version that was bound inside the DWG
Correct.
file.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the history is local to the computer.
Yep.
Oh, and
Yeah,
the
I
other
would.
one was someone asked about the clean out, which you showed, so that was great. Um, and the
Yeah.
other one I think is useful is if you use the session notes, and I actually encourage people to use them. If you hover over the history of the versions there, you'll actually see the session notes pop up as a tooltip, so you can actually use that to identify which is which one.
Yep. It is a bit of discipline. It's like putting comments in design variations. I know Todd, you're a stickler for that. But
Only because I've been burnt in the past with it.
indeed, indeed. Every time you open the project, if nothing's happened or you don't want to put anything significant, you can just leave it.
Yeah,
But I can see I tried to diligently put session one, road and grading, session two was the base, and session three, to the point where I can now identify and get some sort of bit of basically project history and go back and restore as far back if I want to on that particular project. Certainly, my recommendation is just give it a whirl. Try opening a brand new project. Turn on project storage. Have a bit of a tinker with applying it, understand it, and then once you feel comfortable, then adopt it on your projects going forward. Certainly, this will be a staple part of civil site design going forward. the intersection manager has replaced the nominate side road form. So if you're wondering where intersection manager is on the ribbon, it's on the roads tab and it's just found here. If you are using tool space, then you can find it in a number of spots. Right clicking on road strings, you can see it's found here. Network strings, you can see it's found here. And then additionally, curb returns, right clicking it each time, by the way, you get to intersection manager. Either one of those will get you to the same tool. So there is sort of extra tools in here, but really this is more of a consolidation of things that you could sort of do in a number of different ways in civil site design brought into one environment. Now, one of the great things about this is that all your intersecting road strings, whether or not they're supported with curb returns, are all listed here, noted with a T for T intersection and cross for crossing intersection. If I just click on one of those, I can immediately get to that particular intersection. And if I want to identify one on screen, I click intersection, and then maybe I click on this intersection here. And then road 1 and road 2. Oh, that's right. Yeah, is a T. It's a, no, it's interesting. I think I got the wrong one there. Let's just try that again, shall we? I think because I've got my snaps on. Yes, I do. Let's turn those off, shall we? Try and turn them off by pressing F3 furiously. No, road 1, road 2. Okay, well, it could just be that I'm clicking and snapping away too close to the road 1, road 2 intersection. However, the point of this is to show you that you can identify and then quickly get to the different intersections and then unique returns, as I'm going to do down here, unique returns specifically for that intersection. So just a brief mention of what's going on at the top here. Create update intersections, that's essentially saying all of the settings that I have by default for civil site design, if there are intersections that are not supported with curb returns, go ahead and build those curb returns. I'll talk about remove main road edges and keep main road edges in a minute because that's a brand new function. Deleting all returns and resets. So deleting is going to delete all your returns, and whilst delete is going to delete them, it is still going to store the information that you may have applied to that curb return and retain it unless you use reset. And what reset will do is it will basically put everything back to their default values. So let's just have a quick look at a T intersection, and I've gone with road 1, road 3 down here just because it kind of, well, it quite frankly fits the screen quite nicely. Let's have a look at what happens when we come over to the actual intersections. This is just a straightforward T. I'll talk about some of these other functions at the top very shortly. So first of all, yes, road 1, road 3. We've got the option in here to edit each curb return individually and apply a default radius, which is pretty much what you'd be doing if you use the edit curb return form, which, by the way, you can still access directly from here. However, we can also do some things in here which we couldn't do previously, which is, let's just head to delete. Delete all returns. So yes. Software will just basically delete those returns, keep the intersection, but essentially we're left with just a straightforward T intersection with nothing else. Just wait for this to update. There we go. The great thing about this is that I can then go in and use this option, which you couldn't do before, which for those of you that build potentially a lot of connecting road strings and you don't necessarily want curb returns being created at some point where auto model just goes, you should have a curb return here. We'll create one for you. This will deprive the software of that opportunity by unchecking the create option for both start left and for the start right on this side. I'll actually just go back and create the returns here. And the reason why is because I want to show you some tools which very quickly, which we can use to override the curb returns generally. So for example, this one here, override the radius on this intersection. I want 8.95. Click OK. Both those curb returns are updated. The modeling happens in the background. They're updated to 8.95. I'm also able to override the template, something you would have to do via the design data form or through something called multi-edit. For those of you that don't know where that is found there under resample sections. Also by right-clicking on road strings in tool space. That's a really neat little tool if you haven't seen it before. The big one for me, though, is this one. Remove main road edge. Now, we did have a video called Saddle, which is completely the wrong term for this. And we also have a custom variation to essentially remove the edge code or through code through the intersection. And actually, if you look at the graphic on the right side here, what we're essentially doing is generating what I guess what you call it in Civil 3D, main road crowns or priority main road crowns, and removing the edge of bitumen. This will do that for you. So if I click set returns to move main road edge, there's no variation here that is moving the EB code. It is literally being trimmed out. Okay, so as you can see there now, if I turn on the mesh, you'll actually get a better sense of what's going on. Now, you can do that individually per curb return. I don't see why you would, but you can if you want to, if you're looking at just identifying half of the intersection versus the other half. Set to keep, we'll get that back in. That I don't have to click apply, by the way, that's happening automatically. That through code is now being trimmed out. The controls in here are really quick. So rather than having to do one curb return at a time with edit curb return, it's just something nice to now have that one kind of convenient place to manage your intersection and your curb returns. Let's just now very quickly have a look at the crossing intersection, which is this one here. Now, if I did this with Civil Site Design V25.10, I would be getting a four-way intersection here. But the reason why I'm able to get a T intersection is through some nifty controls up the top here. So first of all, switching a four-way intersection is now controlled by this button here, which would enable me to switch out road 3 here and make that the main road and road 2 the side road. But also, this alignment extends well past the extent of the T, which I'll be honest with you, I don't know many people that are going to maybe adopt this straight off the bat. It is an incredibly important tool for many of our US users to have that ability to either start the alignment of the road string or end the alignment or both before and after the actual crossing of the center line or the crown. So although to be honest with you, I have had examples where I've maybe needed to start a little bit further back to show a bit more what's going on in the vertical design or even the plotted long section. So what this will let you do is trim the intersection. Okay, now for those of you that have often wondered what start and end means when you're looking at your curb returns and why we've got remove start returns and remove end returns, what's actually happening is that the road is broken up into basically a chunk. And when it says remove start returns, okay, at this intersection, or let's just say this intersection here, road 3, the side road, these two curb returns start road 3. These two curb returns here end this particular segment of road 3, which is why they're called end. Okay, so when I put new curb returns into the north, they'll begin with the terminology start. So what I want to do is to remove the end curb returns at this intersection, i.e. the end of the first chunk of road 3. So I'm going to go remove end, which is pretty much how I've got it, and hit this button here. Do you know what? I think I've just totally thrown you all with that terminology. It's not that way around at all. Removing the end curb returns is removing those, which is obviously removing the end returns rather than keeping them. So what I should be doing is removing the start returns. So we'll pretend I didn't do that. We'll click this button, which is the button to basically go ahead and reprocess the model and remove the start returns of the intersection. So sorry for anybody that got totally confused by me doing that. Now, what that means is you can create a four-way intersection, but essentially trim off one pair of curb returns from the design. If you don't want any to be trimmed off at all, you can go none, and that essentially restores it back to a four-way intersection using the default values, which is what's being put in here. If you decide that you want to either ignore this intersection or you want to place some variables in place to determine whether or not this should be a T, even if there is an overlap, we have a couple of options up here, which is apply automatic T by distance, which says, look, if that alignment is within a certain range, then it should be a T, or toggle off converted intersections, which basically says, look, if I've converted some intersections to T's, please can you basically revert them back to four-way. One other mention is batters and daylight. So set omit all batters. This will, from this point onwards, ensure that if you use the create update option to build curb returns, no batter entry will be added to the design data form for your batters, for your curb returns, which is normally what happens. We get a batter override entry. Set to include basically is the reverse, which says, hey, if I create any curb returns from this point onwards, please ensure that we have a batter a code entry or batter slope entry added in the design data form. That is all I was got. That's all I've got time for to show on the intersections. Again, apologies for the confusion there. I caught myself out there by removing the end rather than keeping the end, which was a key thing. But yeah, certainly this is the button to then reflect that within the model. Todd, any questions on what we've just done there in regards to
No,
the
no questions have come up on any of that stuff. So the
little
only thing
video
I would
button
make
there?
a
Oh,
comment
go on.
on was one approach I would have used for the trim out of a crossroad to a T intersection would be perhaps a stage subdivision. So maybe I have a, stage one where the road ends, but in stage two, the road extends and becomes another part of
That's a good
my
point.
layout and network. So maybe I want to design the whole thing in the first place, but then in my plan production for stage one, I want to trim it off at a certain point and then only deal with the second half of it in stage two.
Yeah. Thank you, Todd. Yeah, no, that's good. That's a very good point. And look, I just, while Todd was talking, I just used the remove main red edges on all intersections just to show how every single intersection now has that removed. Now, I've gone way over time, so I apologize,
You
but
have, thank you. There
um,
is one question that came in, and the answer is yes. Can you modify one curb return radius? Yes, you can. Instead of using all of the tools Jonathan was showing, you can actually just go to that one curb return and change the number and hit apply, and it'll update just that one curb return.
yeah, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, so now totally having a mind meld as to where intersection manager's gone right in front of me. If we go pick return, this will identify that individual curb return there, and I can just type in, say, 5 if I want, and apply, and that will now set the radius of that particular curb return down to 5 meters.
You could also use all the traditional
You can.
curb return creation commands. They're still there in the software. This is just a manager that overlays the whole lot into one sort of work process.
Yep. Lovely. All right. Well, look, we're going to try and do a seamless transition now where I'm going to pass back to Todd. So I'm just going to go and pause my shell, stop share, which Todd should then allow you
I'm just
to.
stealing it straight away. So you should be able to see my screen now. First off, I want to start having a look at the section volume command. So I'm using the same project data that Jonathan is. So you should be able to see my model viewer here. So I have my network created of the Islet Street and Princess Highway subdivision up in Mollymook. So I'm going to use this as the basis for some of the stuff that I'm going to show you. So that's just to give you some context that we are using the same data set, but a different version of it. Section volume calculations can be triggered in a couple of ways. You can actually call it up from the ribbon. So up here under the volume tools, that's now become a drop down, and there's actually a couple of tools in here for calculation. So this is our traditional volume. So I guess we can become legacy at some point. And this is the new section volumes here. If you are using it from the tool space, then it is simply the one here that says section volumes. So while I trigger that one and let it boot up, this is a new command to the software, so it's not a replacement of an existing command. It's an enhancement to the software, so it's another one that you can use. And it is, as I said, designed to look like the old one in terms of the general layout. So we've got the general idea of the string list sitting here on the left. We have the computation grid of data up here in the top right for the selected string. And underneath now, though, we have a little graphic display showing you what is the section that you're looking at and actually how it's computed in terms of the volume. So we're using polygons to do this sort of stuff. So that's the general layout of the form, very much like all of our volume calculations. It's relocatable, so you can push it onto multiple screens as you've got it. If you want it to recalculate information, it's the calculate string button here. If you want to recalculate everything, if you've made whole scale changes on lots of stuff, you hit the calculate all button. In terms of navigation, you select the string that you're interested to see details about. So I'm currently looking at Islet Street because it tells me up the top here in the top left. If I wanted to have a look at something like Road 1, I click on Road 1 in the list and it'll start to show me information about Road 1. If I give you some context of what I'm looking at, let me go bring Road 1 up into the right spot. Down the bottom here also, there is the total. So this is the totals for everything that is selected in this list. So you can see they've all got tick boxes. So you don't have to calculate all of the totals based off all the strings. So if I say start pulling out roads 2 and 3, you'll see the numbers here starting to drop. So that's your include, exclude from the totals. In terms of the individual string, whichever one you have selected, it will nominate up here in the name of the form, as I said, and it'll give you a summary of the cut and fill values sitting over here below the grid above the graphic display. Now, first and foremost, with the graphic display, it kind of highlights this very succinctly. The software is actually trimming out the model. So if you use something like Total Model or Model Builder to slice and dice parts of your intersections, the software will only show you the bits of the string that are actually coming from the string. So for a typical road intersection like this, road 1 here wouldn't actually be starting to calculate anything until I get to somewhere around sort of chainage, I don't know, 17, 18, where the curb returns are beginning to meet my road. In this zone in here, the volumes would be coming from the individual curb return strings, which is why at chainage 0 here, my section is blank. When I jump to section 17.942, you can start to see that I've got the right-hand side beginning to appear. And that's because the curb returns kicked in and the road string's taking over in terms of information. And this is the graphic display that I was talking about. So it's actually showing you the polygons for the cut and fill. So if I go to a better one, so if I go past the other curb return match-in point, which is probably going to be around here somewhere, you can see I'm now getting a full cross-section because I'm now in my section where the entire data is coming from the road string as opposed to the curb returns. The polygon stuff is the blue and the red. So that's the actual shapes the software is using to work out the volumes. So the volume computation engine in the background is the average end area, same as our other volume tool. And it does have the curvature correction when you go around the horizontal curvatures. But in an essence, it is essentially the area of cut, which is this 2.026 square meters. And then it is the cut at the next section, averaged, and multiplied by the distance between the two sections. And that gives you the volume for that section. And then it will do the same thing for the fill, which is the blue ones on the other side. And it just keeps doing that along the section. That's how it actually does it. But this actually gives you the graphics. I don't know, I find it much easier to actually understand what it's calculating. Now, in terms of controlling the display down here, it is certainly panable. As you can see, I've been moving things around, zooming in and out. If you jump across the top of the grid up here, also the table up here, there is actually a bucket load of tabs to show different things. If I jump right to settings, the display tab here, it allows me to configure how this is actually visualizing my numbers. So I can turn off those polygons, which are the blue and the red, and I might show the cut and fill lines, and maybe I turn off the polygons for the subgrade itself. So now I'm really just seeing the cut and fill points. So this is just showing me the two lines that it's using to do the actual slice and dice for the volume computations. I can also use the exaggeration here to push it up to something weird like that. Turn off the codes because I'm probably not interested in those. So yeah, you can configure up the way you want to see these things. So I might go back to what it was because I think it's actually pretty reasonable. The other thing you can do is down here, there's a little picker button. This one, if you click on this, then in the drawing, you can graphically pick a section to display. So if I click on, say, chainage 50, let's see now, it'll highlight chainage 50 and show me the numbers for that. In terms of the remaining pieces on the form over here, the stripping area and volumes would be if you have applied stripping, and the cumulative volume is simply summing it up as it goes down the sections. I'll talk about stripping in a minute. I have one of those set up in a sec, so I'll jump to that in a minute. I'm just going to talk about the remaining tabs up here. So sections is simply the bulk calculations. It's a cut and fill, so same as the current volume computation tool in the pre-25.1 release software. Materials is the same information, but now we're looking at the materials as opposed to the bulk cut and fill. So the different materials that are in your cross section are shown in columns of information. So you can see up here, I've got my asphalt sections, I've got my brush rock class 2, class 3, right across to my concrete. And if I had more materials in here, they'd show up as extra columns. Navigation, very similar. You scroll and look at the section that you're interested in. So this is now more related to the colored polygons relating to the subgrade materials as opposed to the blue and the red. Material totals is simply the summary of that tab in a nice succinct list based on the material names applied in your templates. The outputs tab here actually is kind of cool. There's a couple of things you can do with your models. One is if you want to see all your numbers, previously it would be CSV files, but now we actually push them out to XLSX files. So I go and push out the computations of this string. I give it a very fancy name, and it will tell me it's created it, and then it should open up in Excel. Bang. So yeah, this you can do whatever you need to for this sort of stuff. So every time you run that, you can get a new version of that numbers. Cogo points, 2D polylines, 3D polylines allows you to extract out either information from the sub-base points or the design points. So that's these points or these points. It would throw them into the drawing. Over here, the CAD tables is the more traditional method of throwing in a table in your drawing. So if I go, say, my material totals, and I throw this in, then this is now showing me the totals for row 1 in terms of the materials I've got in my project. Another cool tool in the software is if you wanted to validate what it's actually using for your subgrade surface for this string. So this is per string. If you go build surface, it'll actually throw in a terrain model into your project that is based off what's happening for that subgrade. So that's the subgrade surface, which I should have turned on in the settings. But anyway, that's the orange line. The other thing that's really, really cool is you can actually see all sections at once as a graphic display. So instead of seeing one of these, you can actually see them all. So it's this section viewer. So you can trigger it here, or you can actually trigger it over in the sections tab. There's a button that says viewer. When you click on that, it'll actually throw open all the sections that exist in your string that you've got selected. You can zoom in, navigate around, and it gives you the summary information on each section. You can use the settings tab. Of course, that opens on the wrong screen. You can use the settings command here to set how this thing looks. So maybe I'm going to change the spacing of my Y and my X to something a bit smaller, shrink it up. You can also use that to configure the colors, what is displayed. I'm hoping that's all pretty straightforward, so it makes sense. If you actually make changes while this is open, you hit the recalculate and it'll recompute all the numbers. If you actually want to push this out as a drawing file, you run export and it'll throw it out as a plain Jane AutoCAD file. So once it's done that, you could then actually open that file up. So this could be something you might want to hand off to someone that's maybe using not even necessarily Civil Site Design or AutoCAD. Maybe they're just using something like TrueView to view drawing files without actually loading them. So I'm just trying to load this into TrueView that I got open on the side here. And it is taking forever because I did something wrong. So you can't see any of this because it keeps losing its mind. All right. So here we go. We'll do it this way. There's TrueView, and if I open up the drawing file, I'll open this up. And my computer has lost its mind. It keeps opening AutoCAD. So we'll look at AutoCAD. While that's booting up, there we go. I will attempt to get rid of this one and bring this one across. Okay, so here we go. So this is just a plain drawing file that could be opened up in any CAD product. So you can hand this off to contractors. You can hand this off to maybe your boss who wants to see the numbers, whatever you want to use. The multi-section viewer is quite a handy way to just see the information en masse. All right, I mentioned stripping. So my road 3 in this model here, so this one here actually has the stripping applied. So if I flip across to road 3 and look at a section, you can see the sections in there. The light green line, it's actually showing me my strip sections. So if you've applied stripping, which is done exactly the same way as you would have done in the past, there's no change in terms of the application. It's done in the design data form as a stripping entry. The software will actually show it to you in the model. All right, let's have a look at the section extents tab. So I didn't actually talk about these tabs when I was scrolling through. I deliberately skipped it because I want to talk about it now. So if I have a look at Eyelet Street, my Eyelet Street model is, let's have a look at a decent section, maybe, I don't know, 130. On the right here is actually anchored the right edge of bitumen to the design, to the natural surface. And maybe the initial intention of my model here was to rebuild the curb and channel, but use the existing general grade. But maybe powers that be decided that maybe they want to save a bit of money and not rebuild the curb and channel. I could certainly strip it out of my design model, but if I wanted to do the what if scenario, I could actually use section extents to do this. So I can come in and add in a new entry. I can pick the range, so I'm going to apply to the whole thing, pick my sides, I'm going to go on the right in the cut, and instead of it being a full slice off, I can base it on a code. I can base it off an alignment I may have specified or even a width that I maybe nominate. So if I pick a code and then I pick the code I'm interested in using, so I go right edge of bitumen and I calculate the string. In terms of the computation now, the right curve and channel has essentially been removed from my numbers. So the sectionless then is of your ability to trim out what is being used to do the volume computations. Another tool in the kit is the ability to pick a different section list that is applied to the computation. So currently this is calculating at every section that's been made. If I wanted to change that, for example, maybe I don't want to do this every 10 meters for some reason. It's the example I'm picking. If I change it to 10, you can see now that's only computing at every 10. So I can create a section list, I can modify a section list and apply that and use that in the volume computations here if I need to or if I want to. The other one that I want to talk about is the extend and resolve. So as I mentioned in the intro, this was actually primarily introduced for requests from a lot of our European users of this software, but there's certainly some applications that I can see you could use it in typically probably I'm going to say rural style roads. So let me pick on Princess Highway. There you go, change 130. So the idea of extension and resolve would be what happens if there is no batter or no match back to the terrain. So the resolve is all about changing that resolve condition, and the extension is all about maybe when I'm building this, my grader has obviously got a set width on the blade, but I need to extend out the design so that I grade an extra meter, that sort of stuff. So that's the idea of the extension and the resolve functions. So the challenge with the extension and resolve is that you actually have to set it up for all of the combinations. And I say challenge because I must admit, just hit add and just put one entry in and wonder why it wasn't giving me what I was expecting. Because if you think about it, you've actually got to deal with the left and the right. You've got to deal with the cut and the fill, and you actually have to deal with what happens at the design and at the datum. So there's actually 8 combinations of things that you actually have to address. Now, to make life a little easy for you, we've actually got this button here that's called Add Defaults. So instead of me adding in 8 lines and manually setting them all up, if I go Add Defaults, it adds in all those combinations for me straight away. And then I can start tweaking the numbers. So there's the datums, cut and fill, left and right. There's the designs, cut and fill, left and right. So that's the 8 combinations I was talking about. So let's pick on the right-hand side over here. So we are datum. We're in the cut case, we're on the right. So that's this one here. So if I start pushing in an extension distance, see down the bottom here that the cut has suddenly extended out by an extra meter. And it's currently using this 2% grade, which is actually the grade of the shoulder, because that's the use current column is actually telling you which column it's using. If I untick that, see how now it's shooting down at the -3, which is now using the extension slope column here. So I can come in here and maybe make it 0, something like that. The resolve slope is the slope of this last piece here. So maybe I want this thing to shoot away at a 1 in 2. So I can change that slope to shoot it up at the angle I'm interested in. In this section here, the other piece that's going to be of interest for me is probably the left-hand side when I'm in design. So left-hand side when I'm in fill and I'm dealing with the design. So left-hand side fill design, which is the last entry here. This one here, maybe I extend this one out 0.5 meter. So same deal here, extends out, but this time it's pulling this slope off the shoulder here, just 3% because this thing has super involved. So same general idea. I can come in here and manipulate these slopes. So maybe I shoot this way at maybe -10, so that's a 10% slope. And then maybe the resolve on this thing's 25. So now suddenly this is shooting down to the surface at 25. So that's the extension and resolve. You can use them to manipulate the cases of when the computations are happening at the end of your models. The one note I would make on this is if you are using the design one, if you've got a batter that's hitting the design surface, then your design's already hitting the surface. So you've effectively already applied the resolve. So make sure it's using the last design code to work out what's going on. So just be mindful of that one. All right, let's move on to the reference profiles because just looked at the clock and I've already hit my time. So hopefully there's no questions on that one. If there is, I can address them at the very end. So
yeah,
nothing's come in. Beautiful.
Well, there has been a question which we've answered, but nothing that we need to address online.
Fantastic. All right. So reference profiles, as I mentioned, is a new tool in the kit for you in terms of resolving the relationship between the centerline and your design code on the edge. EB typically, but could be things like back of curb inverts. Very popular in the US where they actually design by back of curb so they can check the grades of all of their sidewalks. In the example I'm going to use, I'm actually going to try and address the problem that I've deliberately introduced at this intersection here between road 1 and road 2. So the idea of the reference profile, it's a new tool to help you design your left and right curb lines or design edges. It's a graphical way to do it. So we're actually using profiles to show it to you. So if you ever wanted to be able to extract the profile of your left or right codes and then be able to manipulate it, you can use this tool to generate it. The major difference between this and the original sort of profile tool that we have in the software, or design code from profile, is that the geometry information is all being adopted from the center line. So you're actually going to see the center line information used to generate the profiles for the left and the right, depending on which ones you set up. So the center line's the parent, and then you set up a relationship between that and the code you nominate, whether that comes from your template or whether you specify some sort of height and elevation change. Slope or elevation change. And you can also lock regions. So it's really good for that idea of the intersections because we can actually lock up the regions here where the road is running pretty straight, but unlock this region in here where the curb return kicks in so that I can manually grade that part of the world to try and resolve the potential design flaws that I've got in my job. So let me show you the flaw that I introduced into this. So if I run a water drop in here, you'll see that the curb return's actually got a low point right in the guts. And if I do it on the other side, here. So probably from a design perspective, it's not really flash to have a pit right here. Ideally, I need to push the vertical design of the curb return out so that the low point is at one end. So probably going to need to be this end. Now, I can certainly regrade the curb return. That might be one solution, but it still requires me to set the levels of the incoming, outgoing parts of the curb return. So we'll need to modify well, in this case here, it's the left edge of road 2, which I could have certainly done with my normal variations. I could use my varies and I could do some cross-form manipulations. I could use my string control, and then I'd actually have to go and apply that. So it's always this two-step idea. You make the manipulation and then you apply it. This is binding all of that together for you. So reference profiles can be triggered in a couple of locations. If you're looking at the ribbon, it's up here under the profile list. There's a new one in the suite of tools called reference profiles. If you're using the tool space, then it's click on the road strings and there is an entry in here called create update reference profiles. It's probably buried in a few others as well. When you open up the form, it looks like this. It is kind of the one-stop shop to set this stuff up and to manage and update the information. So let me see if I can talk about how it works. So I need to bring up a few things on the screen. So we'll bring up the vertical grading of road 2. And I'm going to have to make this pretty small. And I'll bring up a cross section as well. So I am going to run out of green space pretty fast. So bear with me, please. I'll do my best to manage it. All right. So my left side over here is the element that I'm going to start with mucking around with. So to set it all up, under the settings tab here, you can set the defaults of what code is the one you're typically trying to control. You can also specify this idea of the intersection distance. So this is basically setting up the zones of influence. So anything beyond this distance from the intersection is locked to the relationship. Anything within this distance is essentially unlocked and free for me to design. To help you with the design, we also have this idea of using the design constraints and showing up design aids in the profile that we create. So you can set to show the parent, you can pick a color, and you can set to show minimum maximums. These are the defaults. It's actually pretty good for what I'm working with. But you can change it, and you can change it on a string by string basis as well. But this is just the default settings. If you're doing a large project and you knew you were needing to do this on multiple strings, you could actually use auto create and you could nominate which strings you wanted to do it for. If you want to do it on a string by string basis, you click on the add and then you just pick the strings you're interested in. So I might go that way first. So I come up here and I say that road 2 is my road of reference. That's my parent. The code I want to muck around with is LEB. So it's going to name it this. I click on add. And you may have missed it, but already the cross section has actually jumped. So the left edge of the cross section at chain edge 13, so over here, has actually already jumped up. So that the variation has actually already been applied to the software and my profile has actually already begun to take over. In terms of what it's actually created for me, it's giving me now all the design information for that particular reference profile on the right. So this tells me the parent, it tells me the code, it tells me the matching road edge code and the inner code. So the only time you'd need to use these is if you were not matching into, say, the EB, maybe you were designing to back a curb or invert, then you would actually specify the region of your template that you want to keep locked up. Because if you imagine you're manipulating back a curb, then if you set the relationship from centerline to back a curb and you forget to fix up that it's got to keep the curb shape together, you're going to get the warping happening between the back curb and the top curb rather than the center line and the edge of bitumen. So very much like the inside code on our horizontal variation for manipulating the crossfall. And then underneath, it's set up the locked ranges. So locked ranges are areas where the relationship between the center line and the code that you're manipulating is controlled by either the template or potentially, I'll look in the list here, by some sort of slope and elevation relationship, which is essentially where you can flip out the crossfalls, which I'm going to do in a sec, show you that, but I'll play with the rest of it first. If you wanted to do some sort of road widening, then you can apply that before you get into this, and then it will use that. And then you would definitely need to specify a slope relationship, because if you leave it on from template, then it's simply reading the data from the template and applying that to the profile. Down the bottoms, that's design aids for this particular string, but the real nuts and bolts of it is actually when I click on open vertical grading, and it will open up the grading string, or sorry, the vertical grading for the LEB based off road 2. And that vertical grading, if you actually track through it, you can see it's actually using the horizontal geometry of the parent, which is road 2, its actual center line. So the length of this is actually the same as the length of that one. It's not a separate string in terms of string offset to the left or offset to the right. It's actually using the center line of the road. The other thing it's done is it has projected, oops, didn't zoom very well there. It has projected into this profile 3 design constraints. One that represents the center line projected up at the grade that is set by the template in this case, because I haven't changed it yet. And then the 2 3% jobs so that I can see the range that I need to potentially get my vertical design in. It has also anchored the beginning at my matching code, which is up here, that connect to main road edge, the EB. That's actually anchored to the EB that's sitting on my road 1. It's then specified the zone of influence, which is my 25 meters here, this one, 25. That's actually the IP it's thrown in here. And then the IPs beyond that are actually all locked. So if I actually come in and try and use some of the commands to move it around, it'll tell me off. It says it's locked because at the moment, my vertical grading is only showing essentially the difference between here and here. So this is just beginning if I ever made this into a crossroad, just so that I can have an influence at the beginning. But basically from 0 to 25 is completely unlocked, which is for me to muck around with. Now, any changes to my main road is actually reprojected across to here. So if I come back to the center line of road 2 and I make some sort of design change to this, maybe this 7% is way too steep, so we'll regrade this and slide it down to maybe something like that. If I go back to the LEB profile up here, so if you see up there, the cross-section's gone bonkers. If I go up here and go create update reference profile, you'll see that the cross-section fixes up, and that vertical curve that I just had in the road has actually been reprojected and shown much further over. So anytime you make a change to the source information for the reference profile, whether it is anything in this table, whether it is anything on the source or parent center line, you've got to click the reference, create update reference profile here. So that one was the individual one selected. If you've got multiples that you've made it to, you can actually press the create update reference profile. You can also hit the recalculate all and it'll do all of them because they will all get listed here as you start to make them. The other thing I should show is actually the curb return. So if I bring up the curb returns vertical grading, and again, going to run seriously out of space for this, but that's the curb return grading currently. Now, once I start making some changes, if I actually click the refresh, you can see that the curb return's actually been recalculated based off the last set of changes. So I've slowly drifting the low point around a little bit, but I haven't really got it into the right spot. So some other things are open to me to make some changes. Maybe I need to start to throw in some new IPs into here. Or maybe I need some more room to manipulate the vertical design. Maybe 25 meters isn't going to give me enough room. So maybe I need to change some of the relationships. So let's have a look at doing some of those things. So up here, I can actually go, well, instead of it being 25, I can push it out to 35 meters. And if I go create update, see that IP jumps across. So now suddenly gives me a bigger zone of essentially unlocked or user-defined area where I can actually do my vertical changes. I also may, if I actually look through cross sections in here, may decide that this road actually maybe suits itself to being one-way crossfall. So instead of pulling all of my crossfall information from my template, I might want to come in here and actually go, well, I'm going to use a slope relationship. I'm going to say my slope is going to be 3%. I don't need an elevation change because I'm not doing back a curve or anything like that. And if I update that, see the cross section flips to one-way crossfall. Down the bottom here, the design that it's actually thrown is now essentially sitting on the top white line, which is the positive 3% projection from the design center line. So maybe that's a better solution. So I can start to muck around with the vertical design in here. So now I've got all the tools I want in terms of manipulation. So I come in here and let's go in and add a new IP. And I'm going to say I cheated a little bit with here. I know the number to put in. So I'm going to put a 5 meter vertical curve in and I'm going to set the incoming grade to being -1 and the outgrade to be 5.5. And it throws me in a low point. And then if I actually come up here and refresh everything, you can see there that the IPs at the start and end of the curb return have reset based off the changes to my model, and the auto grading on the curb return is actually giving me what I want. I could go further and start manually changing that, but to be honest, it's actually starting to get me what I'm interested in. If I look at the cross sections, I can see in there that I'm actually starting at about relatively flat, scrolling around, dropping to my low point, and then shooting back up to my 3%. And maybe I want to do some more, be an effort for me to come in here and start making some changes in here. But as I said, I can manipulate all these things to change around all of the stuff that might be useful. So I could actually come in here and go, oh, maybe I want to change this. So drag it up a little bit, see if that has any, oops, not far enough, has any influence. Maybe I'm dropping it too far, but I've got to be mindful that I'm making that too flat. But I'll do that, recompute, see what it does on my curve return. There you go. Still pretty good. Low point's still sitting at the end. Perfect. Achieved my goal. In terms of navigation, so I might close a few things down, make it a little less cluttered. When you're in one of the reference profiles, which are all listed under my profiles, just like a regular profile, I can actually open up its grading and play with it independently. When you're in one of these reference profiles, there's actually a new button in the home tab, which is reference string. So if you click on that, it actually will bring you back up to the parent form. So if you needed to make changes to that form or to the relationship to set up this particular reference profile, you can get back in here and make some changes. All right, so let's make the right-hand side just so that we've got completeness on our model, because we probably need to adjust both. So I'll go in and add a new one, road 2, but this time I will pick on the right side, make that, and I will open that vertical grading, and here's my model sitting in here. And maybe I want to add in some new IPs in here. So let's add a new one in at 10. Let's add another new one in at 20. And then let's make 10, I don't know, let's try something like 31.6, 32. Look in here. So there you go. So I've thrown in a few IPs in here just to try and grade this out. If I wanted to look at my cross sections, I probably should open that back up, have a look. Oops, that's the wrong one. That's the LEB. Closed down the wrong profile, didn't I? I need to look at road 2's cross sections. Of course, it's on the wrong screen. So here we go. So you go, probably a bit deep in a few spots, but maybe it's right. For this exercise, it's going to be good. We might come back and change it in a minute. All right. That's reference profiles. There's probably more I could show you on how to muck around with those things, but I think that's probably enough to at least give everyone an idea of what they're for. If I want to go and see, yes?
there was just one question came in with regards to where this script, how this is being applied in the design data form.
Yeah, good question. Thank you. I probably, in the completeness of time and trying to make a target on our timelines, I skipped a bit. But the way the software actually manages it is in that form in here. It's actually using a script X to generate the overrides in the cross section. So if I actually looked at the design data form for road 2, you'll actually see a couple of script variations in here, which are all auto-controlled by the software. But essentially, it is basically overriding the code you're looking for, in our case, the LEB, pulling the offset and level information off the reference string to control it from in here. So it's all happening in the background in terms of that script X to do the variation to the road that you're controlling. So if you delete the profile string here, so if you come in and delete it, you probably need to make sure you delete the script if it doesn't clear out as well. You can certainly manipulate your reference strings from the reference string form in here. If you did want to delete one, I probably would recommend deleting it from here because in the wholeness of setting up the model, it will delete the pieces as well. But yeah, it's like a two-step piece. So it's not dissimilar in the approach you would do if you were using a traditional profile string and a variation to control it. Do the profile, do the variation. The software is doing both of those parts for you through this dialogue and this form to manage it all for you. Hopefully that answers the question. All right. I was just going to round out and show you if I've successfully graded out this piece. So I probably just need to make sure I refresh the models, make sure everything's up to speed. There we go. Clean that up. So now that the model's done, if I come in here and run my water drop, of course, going to the actual point where the curb return kicks in. There we go. So you can see there it's grading around to the low point on the curb return. Come up here, add one in this way, it's grading up here. So probably from a design and a safety perspective, putting the pit at the tangent point is a far better solution than putting it mid-curve on your curb return.
Just while you're setting the next session up, folks, if the quick plug for a video we published yesterday on the YouTube channel, which is in regards to putting a dish through an intersection, which we published based on a request from a customer, and we put that online. So if you head to our YouTube channel, I'll mention it at the end, but there's a custom variation that will basically draw the dish along your side road through the intersection for you, as we're on the topic of drainage. So I just thought I'd mention it. Thanks, Todd.
No worries. So while Jonathan was talking there, I'm just setting up to do the next example, which is our projected profile. So as I mentioned, this is just for Civil 3D that sits on Civil Site Design. And the idea here is actually to project other profiles into a profile view. So the typical scenario would be I want to show these reference profiles on the vertical design profile for my road 2. But you could also certainly use it for curb return. So this is quite common design presentation practice in the United States, but there's certainly some benefits doing it here. So for those of you using the CAD versions of Civil Site Design on BrooksCAD or the OEM or AutoCAD, this function won't exist. Even though you might see it here in the reference profile form, it won't allow you to do anything because you need a Civil 3D profile view to see it. So all I did in the while Jonathan was talking was to just generate the parent profile, which was to use up here in the Civil 3D outputs. I just use the create profiles command, which you could also do from right click over here and you can make, here, and you could go create update Civil 3D profiles, but you can also access this from the reference profiles command, which I did, which allows you to generate the profile views of the string that you select. Projected profiles is now can be triggered now that I have something to show it in using the reference profiles form again. You can do it here. So you can actually use this thing to do the bulk of this. You could also get to this from the ribbon tab under the Civil 3D outputs panel, or you could actually do this from over here in the road strings. There is the projected profiles option sitting over here. So basically the idea here is you need to set up a group or a component of which profiles to project into. So you click on add, you give the thing a name, so it kind of makes sense to call this road 2. You then tell it what is the string that you're trying to project into. So I'm trying to deal with road 2. So you could go in and pick string by string if you wanted to. If you want the software to try and help you, you can actually click on this button here that says Add Automatic, and it'll search this distance either side of the row to string and find all the possible strings that you may want to show. And then you can just use the tick boxes to turn things off. So I'm going to turn off the curve returns because I don't really want to see those. I'm really just interested in the LEB and the REB. And for these here, I'm going to go for the LEB. I'm just going to pick a different style. So I'm going to go and say that one, and I'm going to pick a different label set. So we'll go that. And then for this one, we'll go maybe, well, subgrade, but that's just because it's a different set of colors, and we'll go below. And if I go create update profile, click OK, close out of that, close out of that. In that profile view now, I'm actually seeing those extra profiles showing up in here, but I'm actually seeing them as proper profiles with vertical curvature. So they're the same as what I'm looking at in the vertical grading. When I'm manipulating them, I can actually see the information sitting in here. And the nice bit is that these things are live to my profiles. So if I actually came into the right edge of bitumen one in here and decided to make some changes because I decided this wasn't good enough, so maybe I came in here and I said that that should be maybe 35 meters as well. So I'll make a change to that. So that shoots out to 35, and then I perhaps delete that IP and that IP. And then I come to this IP here and add in a vertical curve. I don't know, let's go 15 meters. Thread it in, close out of that, close out of that. And then up here, I can go update projected, and you'll see that the projected profile in that profile view actually updates with the latest changes of my model. Now you can access that from a couple of spots. You can certainly access it over here. There's update projected profiles here, create update profiles. So you can trigger it in a few different places.